the meeting to order. Everybody rise, please. Welcome, everyone, to the September 2015 Board of Finance meeting, and ask Mrs. Cook-Lippmann to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we sit tonight, I want to recognize three people. First of all, our longtime Republican registrar voter here in town, Joan O'Rourke, passed away recently. Joan was a mentor and a friend to many of the next generation of Republicans. She served this town very well, always with a smile. She will be missed, and we want to remember her. Second, and I'm reminded, I ran into Hal Schwartz over the weekend. Hal is a longtime RTM member and minority leader for the RTM, and his mom passed away a couple of months back. And I'm not sure that I recognize that here at this table, but Hal's been a good friend to the people on this board. He works very hard, a good public servant. I want to recognize the death of his mom and wish his family the best. And also our own Mr. Mayor lost his older brother just a month ago, and this is the first time we've had the opportunity to see Mr. Mayor. And on behalf of the board, I want to express our condolences to you and your family and recognize your brother. And I want to ask for a moment of silence for all three of these people. Thank you. Before we get started tonight, first of all, welcome back to all my colleagues. It's been a quiet summer for us from a meeting standpoint after a very hectic spring, so we really haven't seen each other since June. I would be remiss if I didn't recognize the fact that each of the major political parties in town held their caucuses and have nominated their candidates for the Board of Finance for the upcoming municipal elections. I want to wish the best of luck to our colleagues, Mr. Mottola, Mr. Walsh, and Mr. Brown, as they seek re-election. I also want to thank Mrs. Cook-Lippmann for her service. She's elected not to, or chosen not to, stand for re-election. We thank her for all her hard work and effort. We look forward to the next few meetings with you, and we wish you the best as you move forward with what you want to do both professionally and personally. With that, I'll go right to the agenda, unless anybody has, any colleagues have anything they would like to say. Seeing none, I'll note that Mr. Mottola has a commitment tonight, and he said he would try to be here. I believe we're expecting Mr. Walsh as well. The first item on the agenda is to hear, consider, and act upon a transfer of funds from the contingency account for the Conservation Department to pay for a part-time payroll. The second item is, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's for the Director of Public Works, and it's to complete a wastewater facilities planning study to the tune of $741,000. There's reimbursement associated with that, so the expected cost that I believe is to be shared is $341,000. Item number 3 is to approve a whole host of minutes for meetings that look like they go back like 5 years. No, it's actually our budget process and to go through those minutes. And as I said, we dispensed with a couple of meetings, so we need to catch up on those minutes items tonight. Questions, comments, concerns on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll go to item number 1. To hear, consider, and approve the transfer of funds in the amount of $31,543 out of the 2015-2016 contingency account to the Conservation Department part-time payroll account to cover the part-time salary for a new wetland compliance officer. Can I have a motion to put this before us? We'll take Mr. Brown, we'll second by Mr. DeWitt. Thank you, and welcome.
Good evening, board members. My name is Brian Carey. I'm the new, meaning new, from May, Conservation Director. So I've basically come tonight in front of you to ask for this request of transfer of these funds out of the contingency account so that we can go ahead and post this position This new position or backfilling of an old position was something that was debated before I came on board. I guess the board and the Board of Selectmen had discussed adding a new position or refilling the position, and they left it up to me to decide after I had taken the reins of the new director to figure out what the need was in the department. After a couple months of being at the helm, there is a need to backfill this position, even at part-time capacity, to try to clear up some of the backlog of work that's been accumulated in the absence of the previous director, and just the bulk of work that's coming in front of us currently. We could use extra field staff to help us catch up with the backlog.
Thank you very much. Second of all, welcome.
Thank you.
Congratulations on the somewhat new role now. We wish you the best of success. And the first time you're coming before us, you're asking for money.
Actually, it's the second time, but you didn't ask me. You didn't ask me the first time, but I was asking for
questions?
money for the purchase of 908 Fairfield Beach Road.
There you go. Okay, I wasn't here that time. Asking me for money. No. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, or can we go right to question and answers?
I'll take question and answers.
Thanks. Okay, any board members? We'll go to Mr. Becker, and then we'll go to Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to
Thank you.
Fairfield. I want to get a little bit of a sense for the part-time versus full-time discussion and where you sit with that. Now that we're partway into this fiscal year, are we to expect, I just want to make sure if we're going to do it this way, that we're not to expect that in the next budget you're going to say you want the full-time. Because I think, I was the one who made the motion to make the reduction, but more so to make sure that when you came in, you built the department the way that you wanted it, be it this position or others. So I just want to get a sense.
Yeah,
there where
the
you
key
are.
right now is the fact that the open space manager is actually filling in the role of the wetland compliance officer, which creates a problem just in the fact that that person really is supposed to be in the field full-time monitoring, the staff that work for him. So to double up that position does create a lot of burden on the management of the open space properties. The wetlands compliance officer itself would help, in the mornings at the desk, cover some of that portion of time for people coming in, but also portion of the field work required to go out and do kind of the task for bond releases and things like that. As far as a year-over-year basis, whether or not this could be transferred into a full-time position, I don't know right now. I think at this moment, I don't envision it becoming a full-time position. It's going to take a lot of time to train the staff for a part-time person just to come in. My only concern at this point in time is even trying to find someone who will be interested in a technical position such as this at a part-time, part-time level. I'm thinking it might be someone who's a recent college graduate who's looking to, find work, or someone who's retired. Normally a position of this, requires this much skill, is a couple years into their career. So that in itself might become problematic. I won't know until I post the position. But again, I'm not just going to go out and try to fill this position with someone that's, shoehorn them in there. We need to get the right fit to make sure that this is a benefit to not only the town, but the department and the way it works. I don't envision that becoming a full-time position over the next year, but I do think what it will do is relieve a lot of stress off the existing open space manager so that he can get out and really do, what his job title is, and, clear up a lot of the issues that we have in our, open spaces that not necessarily are being neglected, but aren't getting the, proper response all the time.
So on my end, I'd certainly hope we can live within this dollar amount, obviously lower and whatnot. But if you run into those things, I would hope that you would consider coming back to us and making sure that we make the right decision. Obviously, if you get a college student and they come in, they take 6 months to train, and then they leave after 6 months, that costs us a lot of money anyways. So if you can't find the right person, and it doesn't seem to fit as you build your department at this point, certainly, come back.
We would,
I think that was our goal. was
Yeah.
for you to be able to, come to us and do that. Certainly, I'm happy to see the part-time versus the full-time and feel that maybe we made the right decision, but, I would say just make sure, because it's coming back, excluding Social Security, I think, in here, taxes, excluding that component on that line, it's coming back essentially dollar for dollar.
yeah.
So, on that end, there isn't really restructuring. That's sort of my point there.
Okay.
And then the other question, Mr. Chairman, was, it looks like, unless I'm missing it, it's the amount just covers the salary, but not the,
And Social Security.
yeah, does it, am I missing that in there because it totals up slightly different than our original motions back during budget, so.
Same. $31,543. Sure, sorry.
Is it,
$31,453 is,
yeah, it
Already
was,
over budget.
I just want to make sure that that's.
Just as a point of order, during our budget process, we voted to put $31,004 plus $449 Social Security into contingency. So, Mr. Brown, I found my notes. So, I mean, it's
Yeah, it's a couple bucks,
It's
but
a
I didn't know
couple
if we
bucks.
wanted to adjust it to match, or if we feel that we're fine there, but just
I mean,
notice that in the minutes.
that number was supplied to me by finance department, so, I mean, if you want to adjust the motion, that's fine.
Is that it, Mr. Becker?
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt?
Well, welcome. Mr.
Thank you.
Carey. My question's kind of along the same line. So, because between getting through whatever you got to get through, and I mean, it's probably not going to be realistic to see this person in a role November, December. So this half-year salary is really full-time for at least this budget season till June, right? For all intent and purpose, right?
Yeah, I mean, we would limit them to probably a 19-hour week regardless of the salary, though.
Okay, so you'll literally limit to halftime no matter
Yeah,
what the salary is.
that's
Okay.
right.
Because the original salary request full-time was 62,008, so,
Right.
okay. And I know I wanted to make the point that we did move it to contingency, so this is just us adjusting back from what we did during budget season. There has been a lot of debate, as you mentioned, about this half-time, part-time, we need them, we don't need them kind of thing. So, and I agree with Mr. Becker. It'd be nice knowing going into budget season, what your thoughts are on this. I know everyone was anxiously awaiting the new director to figure this out. So, I'll support this tonight and look forward to hearing your recommendation for the next budget season.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, I have a couple for myself. And I want to take it in a little bit of a different direction. So I remember when the motion came forward to move this to contingency on a part-time basis, and I was one of those that supported doing that until the new director arrived. Through the years as I've served on the board, there's been this back and forth over the Conservation Department and its budget. There's a constant request for more dollars, more personnel, which was really buttressed by some data that we had received some years back saying we had one of the largest conservation departments in the entire state. One of the reasons I was anxious to see the new director was not because I felt there was anything wrong with the old director or with the management of the department, but rather a new person brings a fresh perspective. So it would be very interesting to me to understand as we move forward into the next budget season, what areas we have to save expense, where we need investment in expense in the department, and what we can do better from an efficiency standpoint. So I would ask, and I would hope that by that time you'll have been here for quite a period of time, and maybe you can come up with some new ideas. As relates to this position, your description of it, when you said, hey, I came in, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is what I heard, right? I came in, this was put on in the contingency pending me getting here. I'm getting here, I see the backlog, I see what we have to catch up on, I see how far behind we are. We need this position to catch up. That sounds to me like a position that's needed to be filled for a period of time, until such time as the backlog is done, and then you can reevaluate how your staff is utilized within the department. Is that a fair interpretation of what you said or no?
At this point in time, I mean, historically, this has been a full-time position, and
Okay.
and obviously, I mean, a lot of what we do depends on, the economy, because,
Yep.
we are processing things on a daily basis. Right now, coming in, we are at a very high point for the department and the amount of work that is being
Yep.
done. So, as we're moving forward, with more work coming forward, we're also still trying to process this backlog. I mean, my intention and hope is that we can get to a point where most of this, we can resolve a lot of these issues, and that this becomes a maintenance thing, moving forward. At this point in time, I don't really see, a full-time position. But again, I think one of my largest concerns about this position being that it is technical is that there will not be a lot of interest in a part-time position that requires this type of technical expertise.
Right.
A lot of people don't go to 4-year college and get a master's degree to, get a job that's part-time. So I do think there's problems. I might have some issues with filling this, and if that's the case, that's fine. I mean, we'll move forward, but at this point in time, it's going to help not only with the processing of work in the department dealing with the inland wetland permitting, which is the bulk of what we do, but it's also going to free it up to do a lot of the maintenance that we need to get done in the open space program, which is really, the larger part of the department that, normally people just don't see. They
Talk a little bit about that. What's going on in that area?
Well, the town itself has over, about 1,100 acres of open space that's under the management of the Conservation Department. That's why the department itself is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, in the state. Most conservation departments in the state aren't really charged with, the complete management of open space that's normally left under the Public Works Department in most towns. We're offering, Conservation Department's doing a lot more than just offering what people see on a daily basis and how they interact with us on a daily basis, which is the Inland Wetland Permitting Agency.
Which right now you're having problems servicing because you don't have enough
Well,
technical capabilities.
Well, we have
fair?
a lot of work going on. I mean,
Yep.
we have multiple public hearings for large-scale developments that are occurring. And just the inflow of work from what we call, our certificates of wetland conformance,
Yep.
which is like a staff level permit. I mean, those are coming in at a rapid pace. When I got here, there was a waiting period of about 65 days to issue that. Now we're down to about 2 weeks. So we've really sat down and tried to get those out. And those are anything from, house rebuilds to just putting new decks, sheds. I mean, not the stuff that requires the agency's full oversight. But that's the busy work that comes with the department. And, the wetlands compliance officer would be someone who would help on a daily basis to kind of manage that, which would free up, the open space manager to be in the field overseeing his crew, which is, imperative. Management, field management is critical to having, the department function efficiently.
Right.
That lack of management on a daily basis while that person's being pulled off to service the wetlands part of the department is creating, a void in the open space. And, that's one of the things that Tom Stanky, before he left, he wrote, a long memorandum just talking about, how that's always been a management issue. I mean, I'm hoping to change that and basically back up the open space manager as much as I can to make sure that that need is being met. On a daily basis, the residents of the town of Fairfield are interacting with us in a capacity that they don't even realize when they are visiting the open space parcels. I mean, if you go up to Lake Mohegan on a given Saturday, I mean, there's hundreds of people up there. It's really
A lot of dogs.
a lot of dogs. It's really, and that's just one example, but that's really that falls under the management of the Conservation Department to manage all of that land.
And I don't want to get into micromanaging anything like that, but I just want to understand it better, because there has been this yin and yang. So with the opportunity of somebody coming in from the outside, that really represents an opportunity for us to understand how that money's being spent more. Now, it's the first time I've heard, and it might just be that I didn't listen and not that it wasn't told to me, that our Conservation Department does a lot more because of the open space initiatives than other towns. I don't
Yeah.
remember hearing that previously, and again, that might be me not having listened as opposed to somebody not saying it.
I think one of the things in the past was the branding of the department was always kind of, it was lacking in the full picture of what the department provides to the town in the way of its benefits and resources that are scattered over 4 different large programs. Again, most people just see that we're offering an inland wetland permitting agency. They don't see the shellfish resource that we manage. They don't see the tidal wetland restoration projects that are continually being focused on. And again, the largest of the programs is really the open space management program.
Are we currently losing money because you're not able to process the permits on a timely enough basis?
No, we're not.
Okay.
No, we're not losing money. What we're losing is goodwill of the public because
Right.
simple
holding up
matters.
projects.
Yeah, simple matters are, being extended because of the turnaround. And again, we process things as they come in. Maybe not on the level of difficulty, just to keep things fair. So it's been a big point to get the backlog of just sitting permits out the door so that we can concentrate. But we're still, if you look at our numbers, we're still above our 5-year average of what we were doing. So we're at a high peak, which obviously makes sense. The economy is doing fairly well.
Right.
Up until the last week, but it's been doing fairly well, as far as construction is concerned. And again, the commission has been meeting on a regular basis, 2 to 3 times a month, to really overhear a lot of these more, highly contested applications. There's one on Stilson Road right now. There's one in Southport, Maplewood. So to that end, I mean, that takes a lot of effort for staff to not only, adjudicate that, but provide all the review of all of those, all of the technical reports that are coming in.
Well, thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
look forward to learning more as we work with you in the future. And Mr. Walsh has joined us now. Do any other members have any questions on this item? Mr. DeWitt?
Just one quick one. First off, Mr. Chairman, I've never heard that comment about open space either, so I don't think that's ever been said, so I feel like I've learned something, so thank you for that. It also makes me think we have an open space manager, and what is he doing, or is he just overloaded? But that's another topic for another night. But the controversy always is, when we lost the wetland compliant officer last time, that someone else had to take up the slack of that person not being there, full-time, part-time, whatever. So if it is true that we can use this person to get rid of the backlog, it kind of appears you're confident that the existing staff, the other full-time staff, can then take up that slack. Is that true?
That's true. I mean, right now what you have is you have the open space manager acting in the capacity of 50% open space manager and 50% as a wetland compliance officer. When he came, he was hired as an open space manager. So he's been kind of shifting responsibilities. Again, for practical reasons, I need him in the field overseeing the field's crew. That lack of management, it definitely affects operations in the department. The wetland compliance officer would be someone who would be, in the field, but really monitored out of the office and would help, with day-to-day tasks in the office, meaning bond releases, things that just make the office run. Not to mention a lot of the oversight of projects that are ongoing. We don't just permit something and then that's the end of it. I mean, there's a process that goes through to make sure that there's compliance. Anytime there's a notice of a complaint or, people call the department with a concern, that generates a field visit and to go investigate. And normally, you get a call in the office, it requires a field visit, and then some type of documentation or backup, maybe a couple phone calls, or it could even require all the way to, having a show cause hearing where you have to bring someone into the board. So, those things happen on a daily basis, and you could never really gauge them. This person would help with that, daily, just really the basic operations of the office.
All set, Mr. DeWitt?
Yes, thank you.
Anybody else? All right, seeing none, I'll call this to a vote. And item number 1 is to hear, consider, and approve transfer of funds in the amount of $31,543 out of the 2015-2016 contingency account to the Conservation Department part-time payroll account to cover the part-time salary for the new wetland compliance officer. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions?
I'm going to abstain only because I work with that department.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. That item carries with Mr. Walsh abstaining. Thank you.
Thank
Best
you.
of luck. All right, item number 2. To hear, consider, and approve the following resolution as recommended by the Department of Public Works. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to complete a wastewater facilities planning study, including an overall comprehensive evaluation of the water pollution control facilities, collection system, and pump station. And whereas the cost of preparing such a study is $748,205. Whereas $749.44 is eligible for 55% reimbursement through a federal EPA Clean Water Fund Planning Grant, and the remaining balance of $340,686 is to be split equally, $173.43, between the Water Pollution Control Authority and the town of Fairfield. Now, therefore, it be resolved that Michael C. Tetro, the first selectman of the town of Fairfield, is duly authorized to enter into and sign contracts on behalf of the town of Fairfield with the state of Connecticut's Department of Energy and Environmental Protection for the purpose of obtaining a federal EPA Clean Water Fund planning grant. And further resolve that the first selectman is authorized to provide such additional information and execute such documents as may be required by the state or federal government in connection with said contracts, and to execute any amendments, rescissions, and revisions thereto to secure said grant. And further resolve that a bonding resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $748,205 for costs associated with a wastewater facilities planning study, including a comprehensive evaluation of the town's water pollution control authority, collection system, and pump station, and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation, be and hereby is approved." Can I have a motion to put this before us? Mr. Becker, and we'll take a second for Mrs. Cook-Littman. The item is before us. Welcome, gentlemen. Please introduce yourselves and let's go forward.
Yes, my name is William Norton. I'm the new superintendent of the Water Pollution Control Facility for the town of Fairfield.
Welcome.
Ed Bowman, Assistant Director of Public Works, Town of Fairfield.
Hello, Mr. Bowman. Please, gentlemen, do you have some remarks you'd like to start with for us?
These studies are due when a facility reaches a couple different milestones. One being when it consecutively reaches 90% of its projected flow for over 180 days, and another is 20 years after the previous facilities plan was done. And we're in both realms of those milestones.
Okay. And what does the study, please tell us what the outcome of the study will be. Give us a little more information. How long is this going to take? What's it going to be? Just walk us through briefly. I know we have some documents on it, but
The study should take place probably between 12 and 18 months, maybe a little longer depending on the complications we run into. It's basically to see and majorly look at an I&I problem that the town has with its sanitary sewer system and some of its trunk lines leading to the wastewater treatment facility. Also, the facility is like, as I said, 20 years since its last upgrade, and its equipment is old and becoming obsolete as new technology becomes available.
so the outcome will be a report back as to what steps we need to take. Is that right?
Correct. It'll give us a blueprint of what needs to be accomplished over the next several years.
What type of magnitude of expense might we be looking at based on that report?
I'd hesitate to guess at that, depending on what the report comes up with, you know.
Are we looking at $20 million? Are we looking at $5 million? Are we looking at, $250,000? I mean, what are we?
I would say more on the $20 million side than the $5 or the $250,000 side.
Right, so it's basically redoing the entire facility potentially, right? And what that means will be defined by the report.
I think a greater expense may be in the collection system and pump station side than the treatment plant, but there will be certainly a large upgrade in the treatment facility as far as, new technology coming out with nitrogen removal and creating a better facility going forward. The facility runs very well, it does. But in order to keep up with new technologies and new requirements put forth by the DEP, we need some of these upgrades at the facility also.
Is it fair to say you have a capacity issue too, given that you said you're running over 90%?
Yes, and that's kind of a two-edged sword, because we have a capacity issue at the treatment plant because we have an I&I problem in the collection system.
What's the I&I problem? I'm just,
Inflow and infiltration, where water's coming into the system because it's not, so to speak, tight.
okay.
Misaligned joints. We have the Rooster River interceptor that runs through a swampy area, through a marshy area, so it's inundated with water constantly, especially during extreme high tides and things, and storms, and things of that nature.
That's the oldest part of the sewer system, too. So.
Sorry, please, speak into that.
That's the oldest part of the sewer system, too. It's over 50 years old, so it's beginning to leak.
So right now, our sewer system and other areas of it are beginning to leak, and what that's causing is more water to go through the filtration system, which is causing us to have the over 90%, which is triggering the study, along B with the age of the facility is triggering the study as well. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over that conversation. I just wanted to get clarification. Do you have anything else you'd like to say, Mr. Bowman? Do you have anything you'd like to say right now?
No, I was going to say one thing. Energy management will be a big part of this study also, trying to figure out the most energy-efficient way to run this plant.
So you think there's an opportunity to lower our cost and better technology and new energy initiatives?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Might not lower the total cost, but it'll certainly slow the increased cost.
Okay. Do we have questions from board members? Mr. Becker?
Thank you. So in here, it mentions contacting other WPCAs. I wanted to see if you could provide a little more information on what that would be. Would that be trying to just find out if from their municipalities there's runoff, or is that discussing, because I know that there's some of the other area ones are dealing with the same situations as we're doing here, the conversation about regionalization, or, so if there's any ability there, maybe to save money for everybody.
I think the report speaks to the connection fee. Is that what you were looking at as far as contacting other WPCAs?
It mentions it in, on page 3, under task 1. So it's section 1, task 1, and then it's item number 3 towards the end. And it mentions other WPCAs. So I'm trying to just understand what exactly you're going to go to them for.
I think two things. I think we were looking at them for the connection fees to see what other municipalities and PCAs charge for connecting to the sewer system and see how that correlates with the I&I problems and how that will tie into the fees that we can collect for the I&I program. Secondly, it ties into what technologies have been put in the last few years that have worked well and what technologies haven't worked well.
Okay. Does this in any way, maybe in another section, or is it just your own plan to have the conversation, at least at a basic level, of if some of the other municipalities have an interest in partnering with us and possibly driving costs down for everybody? I know that's done in a lot of areas these days. So this would obviously be the time to have that conversation. And obviously there's some other municipalities that are having that conversation right now as well.
Well, there's one, one is
Well,
certain.
there's one in particular. I assume you read the article, but you know, be it them or somebody else, this would be the time if you were to have that discussion, would be my point.
Yes.
So I don't know if you can build that in or if you plan to, but this would obviously be the time to have that, because we're not going to do something and have somebody come to us in 5 years and then go back and redo it or come up with a whole new plan. That wouldn't make any sense at all. So we either do it now and we at least talk about it and see if it saves anybody money, and if it doesn't, or if it puts us at risk. Obviously I'm not in favor of that, but anything that might save money long term, partnering, worth at least discussing.
At present, it really isn't part of the charge, but certainly can be if Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, anybody wants it to be, certainly.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any kind of intermunicipal agreements that are being looked at right now. It's something that
Well, yeah, I mean,
we
we're
can
just
look at.
spending $750,000 on a study, so I figured this would be the time to bring it up. I'm one person, I don't know how everybody else feels, but if it can in some capacity be incorporated and at least explored, I don't see how it would hurt. I know we do that in a lot of other areas to save costs.
What's your specific ask, Dan? I'm trying to follow.
Yeah,
some.
there's, I mean, at this point, Trumbull is looking, as to what they're going to do for their WPCA, but I'd have to assume that there's got to be others that are having similar issues, and in a lot of ways we regionalize, or that's kind of been a goal where we can partner with other municipalities and drive costs. So if we're going to expand our facility in some capacity, I don't know if others tapping in and maybe gaining their fees is something that long-term might be beneficial for us, or if it puts us at risk and it's not worth it. So I see a $750,000 study here, and it seems like if there was ever to be a time to have that conversation, essentially for the next 20 years, it would be now. So I'm just trying to find out if it can, in some capacity, be incorporated in here for them to figure out if that's feasible, and if what it might do for us. If it can't, if it's $250,000 more or something like that, then maybe not. But if it can in this, they're doing such a deep study, or they are reaching out for at least some basic information, I don't see why not include it.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Thanks for the explanation.
I guess I have a question to this as well. But I'll ask a question of you gentlemen, the experts. Is it not true that Fairfield, the geographic area of Fairfield, has a system that all drops into our main disposal area, or a collection area, if you will, and it's not connected to anybody else? Is that correct? There's no interconnection with Bridgeport or any other remaining towns, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I'm a little confused as to whether there'd be synergies with other towns, short of making one big collection agency for multiple towns, which seems a little unlikely, but I don't know. There might be. You gentlemen would know better. But it is a closed system within our own municipality.
Yeah, there are no intertown connection. I believe there is one overflow location up on the Trumbull line if something happens at one of their pump stations where it can be diffused into our system.
But in order to do that study, I guess you're looking at, it would include studying, expanding the treatment plant to include whatever will be coming in,
Yeah.
which would be beyond, the scope of this study, but it's an entirely different study. I mean, it could be looked at, but I don't know how seriously engineering it could be within this scope of the study.
Yeah, I think we'd be looking at large investments in interconnections and pumping stations from other facilities.
Sounds like it, yeah.
From other communities.
Trumbull's really the only one who could connect. There are no sewers in Easton, no sewers in Monroe, so, and Westport has its own system, and
Right.
Trumbull is the only feasible connection.
Let me ask you a question. Can I ask you a question on that? Do you know what their volume is?
Trumbull, no.
No, I do not.
Okay, the only thing I want to thank Mr. Becker for bringing it up. The only thing what I was thinking is we're at 90% capacity now. You guys are going to do a study that shows what the intake is, right?
Correct.
If that study goes well, right, and you're able to find these leakages, that capacity probably comes down
Correct.
somewhat. I don't know. Similar studies, is it going to come down 20%? Is it going to come down 10%? Do we have any way of knowing what it's going to come down?
I don't think we have a way of knowing initially until we do the study and do some of the flow monitoring to see where these.
Understand.
We suspect where they are, and I think we have a good feeling of where they are.
I guess what I'm saying is, it sounds like to Mr. Becker's point, in order to do that kind of thing, if it were to make sense for Trumbull, you'd have to understand what their volume is.
Yeah.
Then you'd have to understand what our volume is. Then you have to understand what size facility you would need to build.
Even more than that, I
Yes.
think you have to understand what potential growth of our own community is.
Both communities.
Correct. Both
And both,
communities.
right.
Yeah.
And you would want them to undertake their own study to make sure that they don't have leakages like we have,
Correct.
right?
Yes, because that circumvents everything, because now you're treating water and taking a volume in both systems.
Right. So, right. Okay, I understand that better. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the discussion.
One or the other, I know we've done infiltration and flow analysis before and done some work on it before, and then a few years later, it comes back again because the pipe leaks in another spot or a manhole fails, and so it's always going to be an ongoing task to find the leakages.
And I remember a few years ago, we did something, this was a number of years ago, sending like smoke through
Right.
the systems, right?
That's
Yes.
for illegal connections.
Some pump connections.
Yes, some pump connections, also cross connections, if you have a cross connection with the storm drain
Right.
or
Did you
any
find
other
a
things.
lot in that study?
We did. He wasn't here. But yes, we found sometimes commercial parking lots that were connected to sanitary. We're putting
Nice.
maybe up to 500,000 gallons of water in a heavy rain, so
And that's all been fixed?
that's been fixed.
there's
Doesn't
everything
mean
from that study's
there
been
aren't some
solved.
other ones out there. Yeah.
Roof leaders too.
Yeah.
Roof leaders are
Leaders
very
and
big
gutters
too.
and-
Just to follow on real quick, when you mean leak, you don't mean worry about stuff getting out. You're worried about water getting into the
Right.
system, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, because I thought when you said before the joints were I thought you meant you were worried about the
No, it always comes
getting
in.
out.
it never
It's
goes
the
out.
exact opposite. Oh, I get it.
Most of our system is based on gravity.
Yes.
As opposed to your water system, which is based on pressure.
Type of study. Basically, the study that we did a number of years ago, where it was sending smoke through the thing, that was an entirely different kind of study. It had nothing to do with this. That was just trying to
No,
find
no.
obvious.
Might be doing the same thing.
There may be some sections, you had certain sections in town that study looked at. Now we may be looking at other sections.
Okay, all right.
It's too expensive to do the whole town. That's the
Understand.
problem.
Mr. Walsh, I think you had something? I'm sorry, was that good? Was that good? Okay.
Has this contract been reviewed by the town attorney and approved by him?
I would. I don't know.
I would have to say so because it's at the signing point and that,
Excuse me?
I would have to say so that it's at the signing point. So I would imagine that it's gone through all its steps to the point where it's come before you and now it's before the first selectman.
All right. If the first selectman can find that out and get back to us. And also just in general, every time we see a contract, can you find out whether the town attorney reviews that contract before it comes to our table?
In general, the answer is yes. That's the same question we asked at the board of selectmen level. You're asking me about this specific one, and my feeling is yes, but I have
Okay, it would be,
But that is, you're correct, and per the charter, the town attorney is supposed to review every contract that the town signs.
okay. If you could just find out whether we reviewed it before it got here tonight. Thanks. Have we ever been contacted, I mean, Mike, this applies to you, by Trumbull to consider us attaching to our wastewater treatment plant?
Not to my knowledge. I have no firsthand
Not to my knowledge either.
Okay. And just in your tenures, obviously you weren't here before that, so I'm not asking historically before that.
Just to clarify, when I read that in the paper, the first thing I did was follow up with Joe Michelangelo to see if that had come up, and follow up with Mr. Kiley, who sits on the WPCA board, to see if that had come up in any discussions. Joe was able to get back to me. I'm still waiting to hear from Selectman Kiley. Joe said no, he had no knowledge of that. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a discussion at any level, formal, informal, and no mention of it at this point.
Okay.
I kind of assumed that was part of a negotiating ploy with the city of Bridgeport when I read it in the article.
Sounds likely.
Okay. Any other questions, Mr. Walsh?
What happens if we don't do this study at this point in time? Obviously, we're hitting the 90%. Is there a penalty if we don't do this once we hit 90%, or do it because clearly we have like 2 more years to go before a 20-year would be required, correct?
Correct. Obviously, if you look at the 20-year limit, yes, you're correct. But it's, all of the equipment, everything is engineered on a 20-year lifespan. All of this equipment was bought well before it was put into service. So the equipment has ultimately reached at least its 20-year life expectancy.
Okay.
To answer if we don't go ahead with it, what are the consequences? Once we don't go into this study and we have several overflows or anything from storm events, that we're conscious of the fact that, we do have issues with I&I, the state will and can fine us.
And is this state fining Bridgeport right now?
They're in the process of doing one of these studies,
Okay.
large studies, and they're a little different, especially the larger cities. They have what they call combined sewer overflows, so their systems are both wastewater and stormwater, and they're all in the process of separating those, and that's a lot of the cost that the state is bearing right now is separating those systems. So when you have a system such as ours, which is separate, which our storm system is separate from our sanitary system, they look at that in a different light, in the fact that we have 2 different systems, and your sanitary system should be tight, and sanitary flow should just flow through your sanitary lines and not be inundated with stormwater.
Okay. Are our neighbors all keeping up with their requirements to do this same type of studies, do you know?
I can't speak for all of them.
Okay.
I know that there are studies in West Haven, where I came from,
Okay.
and that we just did a $42 million upgrade and went through a facilities plan and all of that over the last 7 years.
Okay. That's it. Thanks.
Any other? I'm going to go to Mr. Brown, who had it before, and then Mrs. Leclerc.
How long will the study take?
I believe it'll take somewhere between a year to 18 months once they start. And it depends largely on how much data we can get back from metering the system, putting meters into the system to see where we have the issues and where the flow is coming in. There's usually two parts of the year you want to do it. You want to do it in the spring for the spring rains, or sometimes if your study ends up getting approved, you do it in the fall also. But the spring is the best time, so it may take a little longer depending on our metering season.
So the question I have, I guess we'll go to Mr. Mayor, is why a 10-year bond? Any reason? Just pick a number?
Why 10-year bond?
Just, if I might, Mr. Chair,
Please.
to point out to the board that unlike many of the projects that come before you, this is a WPCA project. So it's really the WPCA Commission that is setting some of those parameters and defining some of that.
I'm sorry, that's what?
It's really the WPCA Commission that is making some of those decisions in terms of what they're asking for and the specs they write on this and following the state statute.
Question for you on that. But the Board of Selectmen did vote on this and approve this. Did you guys ask the question as to why 10 years or what the state statute was?
We did not, that I remember from the discussion. And
Thank you.
Can I ask a question in regards to that?
Hang on just a second. Mr. Byron,
Yeah, usually it's 12.
Mr. Walsh just as a follow-up to that, and then I'll go to Mrs. Leclerc.
As a follow-up to that question, we don't have authority to set that time period? I just want to know what our legal responsibilities are. I mean, if you tell me that the charter or state statute says we have no role in it, I just want to know that.
if they didn't need money from the town, it wouldn't necessarily come before this board.
No, I'm talking about the time limit of the bond.
Yeah,
No,
that's
not whether they need it or not need it. I'm talking about the time limit of the bond.
correct. And if, oh, all right, yeah, in terms of approving the bond, we would. If they
We
were-
have the authority, is what you're saying. to
This is
That would be it.
this is
That
a
would be
town
it.
bond, and it's for a project that, it's a study, it's for a project that could go over 20 years. You could bond this for 20 years, you could bond it for 10 years. It's $170,000. 10 years seems reasonable.
Okay. I guess my question was, I was just confused, Mike, by your previous statement. Just when you said that the commission was determining this, the length of this bond.
Oh, I was, sorry.
Maybe I misunderstood you. I just wasn't sure whether you were saying that we have no role in it. If they choose 10 years, and then we have to stick with that, or, up or down.
Yeah, let me clarify.
Okay.
What I was trying to say is that the commission defines the criteria for the study.
Okay, yep.
For that. I didn't mean to get into the specific financing, because they don't have a separate CFO
Okay.
as part of their commission.
That's why I was asking, because I'm
Sorry,
like,
and
maybe I'm
I-
misunderstanding the mechanism here, but now I understand.
I was looking at that in a broader sense. I didn't.
Sure, no problem.
Hear your
That's all I
specific
was
question.
seeking. Yep, thanks.
I'm going to go to Mrs. Leclerc. Thank you for your patience.
Oh, no problem. Do you have a copy of the agreement in front of you? It's page 19 that I'm looking at.
Okay. I have the study, the outline of the draft memorandum. I do not have, but I've read it, and if you ask me a specific question, I may.
Okay. Well, it's got a budget that's broken down into 7 tasks, I guess. And I was wondering if you could explain it to me a little bit, because that, for the last 2 tasks aren't included in what we're approving tonight, that they're going to be based on the findings of the first 5. So could you explain, like, what each one means, and then how much tasks 6 and 7 are expected to be?
I can speak to the first 5.
Okay.
I'm not sure about 6 and 7. I think you would have to speak to Joe about those 2 as
Okay.
their future.
Right.
But obviously, the evaluation of the wastewater treatment plant, task 1, is going through and seeing the limitations of the facility, what's obsolete, what's outdated, what needs to be upgraded, things of that nature.
Okay, so it's the facility itself?
Yes, that's
Okay.
the wastewater treatment facility.
Okay.
The pumps, task 2 is the pump stations. There's 8 pump stations throughout the town.
8?
8.
Okay.
Each one of them will be evaluated on the same criteria
Okay.
moving forward, as far as obsolete equipment, age and of the structures and things of that nature.
Okay. And also the capacity for each one? Like if a certain section of town has developed more than another, would that?
Correct.
Have an
That'll be
effect?
part of the metering and the INI's evaluation too. What's leading into the pump station, which determines the capacity of the pump station.
Okay.
Hydraulic modeling is also that. It's the flow to the pump stations and how those pump stations either flow into one another or into the interceptors and how they get to the treatment plant.
Okay.
Meeting and workshops to go over and discuss all of these findings. And then sewer system evaluation and the capital improvement plans will basically be based on all of those other tasks and criteria, but I can't speak to
It's
the
based on the
particulars.
findings of the first 5?
Right, that's the next steps.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's what Tom was talking about, that it could range,
The
fairly
sewer
large
system
numbers.
evaluation study obviously takes all of that metering information, all of those pump station evaluations into that survey and tells you how your sewer system, which is your collection system and pump stations, and what you need to improve with that. So they have to accomplish these other goals to see that.
Okay. So this is really like our design phase of a much bigger project is,
Well, this
Really?
is the,
No?
this is the study phase that will lead into the design phase. Would
That
Okay.
6
lead
and
into
7
the-
would be design phase.
would
Okay.
lead into the construction phase.
okay,
You good, Ms. Leclerc?
yeah.
Mr. DeWitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have our policy on bonding and capital purchasing in front of me. And maybe I need to hand it to Mr. Walsh to get an attorney's eye on it. I don't see anything in here that says we're bonding for studies. This bonding policy is all about buying things or buying labor to, so if this were the 20 million you were talking about to fix all this thing, that would be fine. But I don't see anything on here that talks about studies. I don't know if that's an issue. To Mr. Brown's point, the 10-year, what our our recommendations were anyway. 20 years was building an infrastructure.
And
So
this is infrastructure.
This could
Infrastructure
probably
related.
even go
Yeah.
under 20 years if it were. When we talk about the 20 million, that's going to come. That would be definitely a 20-year bond. The 10-year says equipment and certain non-recurring vehicles, so I'm not so sure that that's. So I have this if anybody's.
Thank you,
interested.
Mr. DeWitt. Excellent point. Any other questions, comments? I want to, yes.
I think just to clarify that point, if you look at this as was described earlier as a study, then a design phase, then a construction phase, if you translate that into school building projects, we do routinely bond architects doing their study and design phase. It's just not broken out like this in separate phases, though we often will provide 250 grand or so in seed money as a separate funding to start a school project and eventually roll that into the overall bonding.
And
So it's up to this board to decide whether what you want to do. So I don't mean to, but in terms of precedent and looking at this as part of a combined construction project, it might be analogous to a school project in that respect.
I think that's, thank you, Mr. Tetra. I think that's an excellent point, because it is, can I ask you to stay at the table for a second? Because this leads to another question, if you don't mind. Thank you. Because this gets to a couple questions that I have, if everybody else is done. Can I? Okay. So this is the first phase of what could be a many, many year, very expensive project for the town. Correct? And this is mandated by what you gentlemen lay out as being required because of capacity issues, as well as the age of the infrastructure that supports this, as well as some regulation changes at the federal and I assume state level related to environmental needs, et cetera. Is that all true?
Yes, both those requirements are based on state statute and the DEEP as far as capacity
Right.
and time evaluation.
So basically, we're required to do this study based on hitting those two items. And as Mr. Bowman, you point out, over the period of years, we might be able to save money on the energy side. So there's better technology. So there's a lot of reason that the study itself makes sense. And right now, you're here to request the funds to just do phase one, which is the study. Correct?
Correct.
And that's to Mr. Tetro's point and Mr. DeWitt's point. The total cost after all the reimbursement to this is $170,000 on the town's dime as it relates to the bonding, with also $170,000 coming from the WPCA.
Correct.
Correct? So we're splitting the financing of this phase of it in this together. But I want to make clear of something, because we're going to have this $20 million nut that's coming down the pike, perhaps, whatever that nut is, right? We're not obligating ourselves to joint fund that, because that's a larger discussion over where those funds should come from. Is that a fair assessment of this?
Yes, that's a discussion, I believe, for another day.
Because the WPCA is technically a completely separate organization with its own budget, its own approval process. Is this correct?
Yes, as you see in the budget book, when it comes through every year,
It's a
this
separate
is
voting
typically,
item.
it's a separate voting item. It's not, and I think separate voting item to clarify that it's not tax revenue
Correct.
that's being used to fund the day-to-day operations of
It's a
that.
service fee that is billed separately and that we pay twice a year. Is that correct?
Correct. As this board started getting a discussion during last year's capital plan,
Correct.
and it pointed out the need for having kind of an ongoing discussion on that, on perhaps some clarification in terms of where the capital improvement funds come from
Right.
and what we choose to do. There's certainly some difference of opinions out there, but there's not a clear definition either in state statute or our charter as to where those funds come from.
Right. And
So I guess the point I get to your specific question, are we obligated? No. Would I see that as a discussion we would have? Probably at each point until it's clarified somewhere in the charter or state statutes to how this should be handled.
And that's my point. And by the way, I don't have an opinion right now where that should come from. This is the first time, this is my 10th year, I guess, on the board. This is the first time something of this magnitude related to this cross between the WPCA and the town has come up. But I would imagine this has got to be, in terms of, we're looking at a bigger project, right? I'm thinking in terms of what's coming next.
Oh, I think we want to definitely look in terms of the larger project.
Correct.
But also, at some point, we've kind of had this discussion twice now. We'll have it again until we clarify it some other way. So I think in the long term, we want to clarify how we want it to work.
Right. But the odds are, so the study's got to be done for a variety of reasons. We're looking at a $170,000 item to be bonded over whatever period of time we decide, coming from the taxpayers as part of the tax rate. There's an additional $170,000 that'll be baked into the WPCA budget, and it will be funded by the same the fee that comes from the WPCA.
Correct.
After that, we'll get the results of the study, and then you'll enter whatever you want to call it, design build phase, whatever you want to talk about it. And there's got to be a larger discussion about how that gets funded, because that's going to be a much more, we're assuming, a much more expensive initiative.
I think there are a number of issues along those lines that make that discussion important to have.
Does anybody want to, any thoughts, comments, concerns? Is that clear? Okay. Mr. Walsh, anything? No. Okay. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Tetro. Any other questions on this item? Go to Mrs. Claire.
Have we already been approved for the matching funds from the 55, the grant, the reimbursement? This is the
Yes.
grant? Okay.
Okay. So the funds are there, and this isn't one of those, we got to go and get the funds
The
afterwards. We know
approval
the
from
funds are there.
DEEP.
Yeah. Okay, I want to turn to the specific language in the bonding resolution. Thank you, Mr. Tetro. And ask if there's any comments, questions, concerns on that bind and on that resolution, including the length of time, because that was a discussion point. Does anybody have anything? Mr. Becker?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. If we do it a certain way for other projects, like, school construction, and it's sort of that similar length, and then it rolls up into it, is there some sort of adjustment? It's not a ton of money, so it's not a big deal, but should we adjust the resolution in some way to essentially mirror that? I mean, for me, if we could do that, 20 years, and then any other wording that sets us up to kind of roll it into it, whatever we do,
So
that would
turn
be
to
ideal.
number 5, turn to page 2 and point 5. Okay, which goes with the bond language. Do you have an amendment you want to propose to that language?
Let's see. So it'd be in 2 spots, we would have to adjust that to 20.
Correct.
So I'll make a motion to amend, make a motion to amend both the locations where it notates, the first one, 10 annual installments, and then the second area where it brings up 10 years, and adjust both those locations to 20 instead.
220. Do I have a second to that motion? Seconded by Mr. Brown. Okay, can we have discussion just on the amendment? So what this is doing is extending the term of the bonds from 10 years to 20 years, which really matches, to the point, the useful life of the,
Well, in the wording of our own,
in the wording of our own policy.
Right.
Even though, by the way, remember, this will run out well before this thing is implemented and move forward. So it's not going to be an exact match to the 20 years. Because the clock is going to start ticking on this money well before it's going to start ticking on the rest of the project.
And
Yeah, right, can't wait 20 years to pay this off.
Well,
That's not true.
you're going to bond this funds.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was just going to point out, to reinforce what you just said, Mr. Chair, and that even for a single school project, and the simplest one to look at is Ward Roof.
Right.
We did that in 4 years. They were bonded, in separate packages. Not quite in 4, I think, maybe in 2 over that time, but, so every project is broken into pieces, or can be broken into pieces, so they may not all match up with the same 20 years for an entire project.
But with the school thank you. With the school projects that come closer, this thing could be years and years, correct? Because you're going to complete the project. You're going to complete the study. That's going to take 2 years. We're going to have bonded that. And then you're going to do a design phase. That could take another 2 years, right? You're not shovels in the ground. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're several years out.
I would say a few years, absolutely, yes.
Right. I just want to point that out because it's not an exact match.
this would maybe be a more technical question as to how the mechanics of the bonds then with the school projects, but we initially bond, but then it goes into, some of those things go into bands, and then when we do
That's the
that.
3 years, and then it gets transitioned.
But then when we do that final, that they come to us and then say it's going to cost you $20 million to do that school, doesn't that actually incorporate some of that early money?
Go ahead, Mr.
And
Mayor.
then move it on to one final? Maybe not.
On? It's on.
Yep.
Good.
Your voice is off, the mic is off.
I'm trying to recall the preliminary construction schedule, potential preliminary construction. And, I mean, this thing, as far as work being done, goes out for 10 years. I mean, so we're talking paying for this over a very long period of time to just confirm your point, Mr. Chair. With respect to the bonding, we don't ban everything that, we go through, we ban things, bands are paid off in 5 years, and then they get rolled into bonds. And so, and the bond, though, is then, if the thing has been banded for 5 years, the bond is limited to 15 years, because the total max is the 20 years.
Gotcha.
It's just not an exact match. And
Yeah.
by the way, to Mr. Tetro's point, it's usually never an exact match.
Yeah.
But usually with a school project or something like that, it's closer than this one could potentially be.
Yes.
Right.
So even if we try to
Closer
align it,
execution, you mean.
Closer execution, where a school project, the bonds could be within, I'll use Mr. Tetro's example, 4 years. This could be within 10 years.
Yeah.
Because you don't know when they're going to start building this thing.
And in referencing your earlier comments and conversations, in most municipalities, the rest of the bonding, when you get to the point, would be bonded by the WPCA as opposed to by the town. So though the work goes out, potentially out to, and the use goes out 20, 30, 40 years, there may be no more bonds from the town.
Right. Fair point. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Does that help answer?
yeah, that's fine. So obviously, no matter what we do, we're not going to be able to line it up much with this
No,
project.
I think
so-
you bring up a valid point, and Mr. DeWitt, regarding our policy. The only flip-flop to that on this is just that it's $170,000, and that's the only thing you
Yeah.
might want to consider. But it's It's absolutely valid. Right. Does anybody else have a?
It feels more like 3 years.
Right.
I mean, really.
That motion still on the table?
The amendment's still there. We're still discussing the amendment from 10 to 20 years.
Okay, I have a question.
On the amendment,
Yeah.
please.
In regards to the study itself, does it have to be 20 years from the time of the last study?
No.
Okay. It could be before that if you
It could
get
be before
90%.
that, but the triggering mechanism is 20 years.
20 years from the date of the study,
Mhm.
the last study.
Yes.
Or the 90%.
Or the 90%.
So if we hit 90% at 15 years, the next 15 years, if we hit it again,
Excellent
Yes.
point.
And I believe
we'd,
we're probably way past 20 years from the last study also, because we're about 18 years from end of construction. So then you're looking at 2-3 years of design, and then, the study was probably another couple of years.
okay. So if we hit 90% after 15 years, we'd have to do another study, correct?
The DEP would come forth and say,
Yep.
yes, we would like you to do another study.
And therefore, if we did the 20-year bonding,
Yep.
we'd still be paying for the bond for another 5 years, although we're already starting another study.
Correct.
Based on that, I think that we should shorten the time period, because right now we're already at 18 years, right?
From the end of construction.
Yeah.
Well, remember, we're at 10 years, though. So,
No, I'm saying that I don't know if I want to support a 20-year change,
I agree. I'm just,
because I'm afraid, I don't want to be paying for something after we're already having another study done.
no, I agree with what you just said, and I think it's a very valid point. I think the flip side to that is, right now, from study to study, we're closer to 23 to 25 years than we are 20 years.
Probably, yes.
I
Right.
recall. Having been here then, it was 1993, so.
Okay, so you're not, I think your point still holds, that we could be forced to do it in another 15 years, so you might not want to go to 20 years. But I don't know that you want to shorten it to 5 years.
No.
10 years seems, right,
years might be middle ground.
right.
If I might, along the lines of that discussion, when we're talking about fire trucks or DPW equipment that have a design life of 20 years, I think Mr. Walsh hit the nail on the head in terms of you don't want to finance it beyond the design life.
Right,
The difference here is we're designing the system, if you will, or designing the enhancements or the expansion of the system. And based on the study and projections they're making, they can look at designing it as a 20-year system. That doesn't guarantee that it doesn't run out in 17 but we're a pretty mature community. One could argue that based on what they find, the growth trends ought to be pretty solid unless we go and, if there's some other big add-on to the system that we're not envisioning at this point. But I think they should be able to design it so that to meet the life that we're anticipating on the funding side, or at least come reasonably close to it so it doesn't get us into the jeopardy that Mr. Walsh was talking about.
thank you, Mr. Tetra.
A step further, the equipment is designed for a lot longer than 20 years. Is what happens is you get close to capacity and you get infiltration inflow. A lot of our equipment there is, 30 or 40 years old, correct? It's, so it's not just the equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Mr. DeWitt?
But we're only talking about a study. See, I'm with Mr. Walsh. I could almost lean more toward 3 years, because if this thing isn't done in 3 years, we're going to be in real trouble. But I'd be happy to stay with the 10 years, because I could see that scenario happening
Right.
just based on study. Just, yes, 2 years from now, you're going to be here for the big nut, and that's going to be 20 years. I totally get it.
Right.
But this particular study thing could, for all intent and purpose, happen within 20 years, so.
Okay. So the amendment is before us. Any other comments?
I have one question. Technically, I know what the bond amount is, and I know how much WPCA is paying, and I know it's being split over 2 years and all this stuff, but really what we're talking about here is a $172,000
Correct.
bond. And I'm questioning why we're even bonding this money. And it's not even paying cash or agreeing to pay it. It just doesn't seem to be a lot of money to be sitting here saying we're going to bond this thing over the next 10 to 20 years on a study, number one. Number two, I question why we just don't build this amount into the WPCA budget, some amount of money to build up so that this money's just there to pay for in cash over the next 20 years.
Okay.
I think that leads into another aspect of DEP requirements.
Yeah?
You can pay any way you like as far as the town, but you have to have the bonding authorization in place to receive the DEEP money.
Okay. So the reason to bond it is to get the
To-
reimbursement of it.
Just appropriate, you have to appropriate the bonding. You have to put it in place.
And this is,
That's
this
not right.
is on,
Just
off.
turn yourself off. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next question. Go ahead.
This is part of a capital project.
Go up.
This is part of a capital project, and capital projects are normally bonded. And this is, I mean, basically, if it's over $100,000, it goes into, anything over $100,000 goes into non-recurring. And then, but I mean, it's a reasonable, sensible, bonded item.
May go into.
But I'm not saying, but you can pay for anything the way you want to pay for it.
But the other reality, I got to ask a question on this. So this is one of those, if we look at the bonding resolution, right, we're actually asked with bonding $748,000, not 170, correct?
Right, we always bond what we authorize, what the total project authorization is. We only borrow what we spend.
Okay, and here's my point. I want to go back to something you said, because you used the term appropriate. In order to get the funds from the state, et cetera, we would have to appropriate the entire 748. Correct statement?
Yes.
Because that's our understanding of it. So if we were to just say, instead of bonding this, appropriate it from our budget, we would have to appropriate it from somewhere in our budget
Correct.
to the tune of $748,000. We couldn't, even though we know, based on all the agreements that are already in place, it's only going to be the net is 170, we'd still have to adjust the budget to the entire 748.
Correct statement.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Stone?
Could you repeat the amendment?
You just want to make me read? No.
No, just, no,
Oh, okay, just the amendment, not the whole thing I read. Okay, so if you turn to page 2 of the bonding resolution, under section 5, right? And Mr. Becker, please correct me if I go wrong. I do not believe I will, but I want to make sure. All right? It currently reads, "The bonds may be designated public improvement bonds, series of the year of their issuance, and may be issued in one or more series, and may be consolidated as part of the same issue with other bonds of the town. Shall be in serial form, maturing in no more than," it currently says 10 years. What the amendment was to make that 20 annual installments of principal, the first installment to mature not later than 3 years from the date of issuance, and the last installment to mature not later than 20 years from the date of issue. That is the amendment. Correct statement?
Correct.
Okay? And that's the item before us right now, is to change those 10s to 20s. Okay? Can I call for a vote on this item? All in favor of amending this resolution from 10 years to 20 years? All in favor? Those opposed? Okay, the amendment fails, and the original item is back before us. Mr. Becker, thank you. That was a worthwhile discussion to have, so I appreciate that.
Yeah, and for the record, I chose to vote with where I went on the amendment, but I in a lot of ways, I could be, it's a difficult one, and I'm all over the map on it, as I think everybody, and, but either way, I think we'll be okay and get our study, so.
Okay, thank you. So the original item is back before us. Are there any questions, comments, concerns on the original item? Mrs. Leclerc?
I know I've been through this before, but the bond resolution only refers to a study. It doesn't refer to the specific contract that we've been provided or the financing arrangement. And to me, I feel like we should have that attached so people know what we intended.
Do you want do you want to make a motion on an amendment there, please?
Sure, I'm just trying to think how to do that, because there is no actual schedule that lays it out.
You can make it a schedule.
Uh,
Add number 7.
Okay?
You can make the agreement a schedule.
Yeah,
What, I didn't hear what Jim said.
go
You can
ahead.
make the agreement a schedule.
Okay. But even the agreement doesn't have the budget that's on the agenda?
No.
Okay, so what we can do is,
On page 19, it ties out to the 748, but then it doesn't have that we plan to get reimbursed.
but it does have it within what we're voting on, because it's included, if you see, in the write-up that I so dutifully read at the beginning.
Right.
So we can make sure that that would in fact be part of what we're voting on, correct? Is the write-up as it's written on the agenda, which lays out the financing.
Okay.
The resolution is the whole, starting at whereas.
I think you're technically voting on the resolution. And the,
Okay, so we can make this part of the resolution.
yeah.
Because here it is.
Well, it says.
It says it right here. To hear, consider, and approve the following resolution as recommended by the Director of Public Works. To Mr. Mayor's point, whereas, and then it lists the entire thing, and it also lists out the financing elements of it.
Yeah, that's right.
The only thing that's missing from this is the incorporation of
The agreement itself.
the agreement itself.
Okay.
So if you want to make that motion, feel free.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to add, so I just want to add it to the bottom of the resolution?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make a motion to add, as number 11 of the bond resolution, the paragraph 2 of our agenda, where it says, whereas,
You want to go all the way down the bottom.
um,
Authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation in accordance with the contract listed as Exhibit A.
list, okay.
Do we want to do that? We can do that,
Exactly what
right?
Tom said.
Is that what? Yeah, so, do you want me to help?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I think it's everything in the agenda for
So
whereas.
Deb-
Oh, right.
Deb, what we want to make sure is that item number 2 of our agenda is exactly as is written from the item from whereas. The first whereas, all the way to the bottom line, where it says such appropriation, right? And we want to read, in accordance with the agreement between the town of Fairfield and Wright Price, included as Exhibit A of the resolution. Okay? Do we want a, Mrs. Leclerc, I want to give you credit for that motion. Okay, so you have the
Okay, I make the motion, as Tom previously stated, to add that language to section 11 of the bond resolution.
and I'll second that since I read it. So that amendment is now before us for discussion. Anybody have anything on that amendment? No questions, comments, concern? All right, so I'm going to vote on that amendment, and that amendment is to add the language to the bottom of item 2 of our agenda, incorporating and referencing the agreement between the town of Fairfield and Wright Price. Okay? All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? So that's now part of the resolution. And now the resolution as a whole, as amended, is before us. Any other questions, comments, concerns on that? So, if there's no objections, I would rather not read the entire item, but it's item number 2 on our agenda, from whereas, all the way through to the last line, is appropriation, including the language, incorporating the agreement between the town of Fairfield and Wright Price. And I'm happy to review that with you tomorrow, Deb, if necessary. Anybody else? Okay, so I'm going to call the item as a whole for a vote. All in favor? Opposed? Abstentions? We're done. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for
Thank
your
you.
patience as
Nice
we
to meet
work
everyone.
through the procedure. Mary, thank you. All right. Now we have a rather lengthy item in number 3, which is administrative in nature. And it's related to approval of minutes all the way from our January 6th meeting all the way till June 2nd, incorporating all of our budget hearing meetings. There was about 145 pages worth of minutes by my count. Does anybody have questions or comments, concerns on any of the specific minutes at this point in time? No one? Okay. I want to put this, I should technically put this before us. Can I have Mr. Brown, can you put this before us? Mrs. Leclerc is the secretary, can you second it? Okay, so the minutes are now before us. Now, we can do this one of two ways. We can vote on these item after item, item after item, or I can just read basically all the minute dates into the record, and we can vote on it across. Now, the problem with that, okay, is there were people that weren't at specific meetings. That'd be, and there's nothing saying they can't vote on the minutes of those meetings, to my understanding, right? So we can do it that way and dispense with it, assuming there's no problems with the minutes. Does anybody have a problem if we do it that way, as opposed to calling them off one by one? Anybody? Okay, so that's what I propose to do now, is just read this and then ask for a group vote on this, okay? To approve the minutes of the regular meeting of January 6, 2015, February 5th, 2015, quarterly meeting February 17th, the budget hearing of March 9th, budget hearing of March 10th, budget hearing of March 12th, budget hearing of March 18th, budget hearing of March 19th, budget hearing of March 24th, the budget hearing of March 26th, the budget hearing of March 28th, the budget meeting of April 2nd, the special meeting of May 7th, the quarterly meeting of May 12th, and the regular scheduled meeting of June 2nd, all of 2015. Those minutes are all before us. Okay, I'm going to call this for a vote. Mrs. Cook-Lippman is back in the room. All in favor of approving? Oh, yeah. We've decided as a board to vote on all these minutes as one time, okay? All in favor of approving these minutes? Those opposed, abstentions? All right, all the minutes are approved. I think we could give a clinic on that. Okay. Last item, any communication that's come before the board? I know of none. Mr. Mayor, do you know of any?
I have none.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What we do have is, we have a series of meetings this month, so we go right from a lull right into a busy period. On September 15th, we have the capital planning budget workshop. And later this month, I believe, but don't quote me 100%, I think on the 29th or so, is the quarterly review. We'll be reviewing the last fiscal year, the end of the last fiscal year. Should have additional information on how we finish the year. We look forward to that. For the budget, for the quarterly, or rather for the capital planning workshop, we're going to be all set. Regular schedules, waterfall schedules, long-term planning. We're going to have our colleagues from Board of Education and Education Administration, as well as the RTM here. One thing I would ask is, there's been a lot of newspaper reports and such at Penfield. It'd be good to have the best available information on Penfield, because I'm sure that topic is going to come up. And it's a piece of the capital planning workshop. So it'd be good, we might not have a resolution at that time. I know the board, the Penfield body has work to do, but I can't imagine discussing capital planning and not having that topic come up. So I just want to give advance warning that that's a probable item for that agenda.
It's my favorite topic.
I can imagine.
Be great to see what year you put that in the waterfall.
It's like Niagara Falls. not Niagara Falls.
I knew there was a setup there somewhere. All right. Does anybody else have anything else? Or anything else related to our upcoming meetings that they'd want to see? One of the items we're putting on our quarterly agenda is an actual report from our budget subcommittee, and I know the audit committee is meeting at that
Prior
point
to
as
the
well.
meeting.
Prior to that meeting as well. So, anybody else have anything else? All right, I thank you for your time tonight. Can I have a motion? We'll go with Mr. DeWitt. We'll go with Mr. Stone, because he always wants to adjourn. So, we'll say, all in favor of adjournment? Abstention, or noes, or abstentions? We're good. Thank you, everybody. Good night.